Good day from the Vero Essene Yahad. In this episode, we have 5 different presentations. They're short, easy enough to pack into 50 minutes. First, the resurrection of Nero, the Nero Redivivus legend. Did Nero really kill himself, or did he sneak away to come back another day? Let's find out. The second is defining the Son of Man in Ethiopian Enoch. Yahshua calls himself Son of Man many times in the Gospels. But the only place we can really find out what that means is in Enoch. And here are those passages. Next, rare Roman descriptions of the Second Jewish Revolt. We hear a lot about the First Jewish Revolt, and I have done numerous programs on the First Jewish Revolt. But what about the Second? That came about 60 years later. There's very little material on that, and what we have, I have for you here. Fourth is Colorado, a Yiddish poem praising the mountains of Colorado and comparing them to the mountains of Israel. And fifth, well, I haven't figured out what number 5 is, but I'm sure by the time we get there, it will be reckoned. I hope you enjoy today's episode, and I thank you again for listening. Don't forget to support Hebrew Nation Radio. Where else can you get programming like this?
You are about to experience Snyder Presents. Direct from the Vero Essene Yahad, a Hebrew Nation Radio original program. JSP is a variety show seeking out Jewish and Christian origins, religion, theology, and history, and doing so in a fashion that is both educational and entertaining. Welcome to Snyder Presents.
Nero, the beast, the Therion, the wild man of Revelation 13. The number of his name adds up to 666. He who seemed to die of a mortal head wound, yet came back to haunt Rome several times. The Nero Redivivus legend, that is the Nero coming back to life story, was a belief popular during the last part of the 1st century, that Nero would return after his death in 68 AD. That legend continued on for the next 4 centuries, and indeed, some kind of Nero kept coming back over and over again. The earliest written version of the legend is found in the Sibylline oracles, which I've talked about before. The oracles claim that Nero didn't really die, but he fled to Parthia, where he would amass a large army and return to Rome to destroy it. Dio Chrysostom, the Greek philosopher and historian, he wrote, "Seeing that even now everybody wishes Nero were still alive, and the great majority do believe that he is still alive, although in a certain sense he has died, not once, but often, along with those who have been firmly convinced that he was alive and still alive." Augustine of Hippo, he wrote centuries later that some believed, I quote, "He now lives in concealment in the vigor of that same age that he had reached when he was believed to have perished, and will live until he is revealed in his own time and restored to his kingdom." Among the early Christians, this legend shifted to a belief that Nero was the Antichrist. And in fact, at least 3 Nero impostors emerged to lead rebellions against Rome. The first, who sang and played the lyre, and whose face was similar to that of the dead emperor. He appeared in 69 during the reign of Vitellius. just a year after his supposed death. Then, during the reign of Titus, 79 to 81, there was another impostor who appeared in Asia and also sang to the accompaniment of the lyre and looked just like Nero, but he too was exposed. Then 20 years after Nero's death, during the reign of Domitian, there was a third pretender. He was supported by the Parthians, the enemies of Rome, who hardly could be persuaded to give him up. The matter almost came to war over this Nero Redivivus. Some Bible scholars see the description of the wounding and healing of the beast in Revelation 13:3, and the mention of the 8th king, who is also one of the earlier 7 kings, in Revelation 17:8 through 11, as allusions to the Nero Redivivus legend. And I am one of those. We also see Nero coming back to life in the form of Domitian, the youngest son of the general and emperor Vespasian, whose reign, like Nero's, featured the persecution of those considered to be of foreign superstitions, including Christians, Jews, and Druids. Just as many saints died during that first Neronic persecution of 66 and following, which is called, in theological terms, the Great Tribulation. In Domitian's reign, 30 years later, that tribulation theme was taken up again as Domitian sought to destroy what was left of the Desposini, or the blood relatives of David and Yahshua, who is called Messiah. In that Domitian persecution, well-known believers like Epaphroditus of Philippians chapter 2 and Clement of Rome lost their lives, as well as possibly Josephus Flavius, who gives us our history of the antiquities and wars of the Jews. I might add, one detail that's often overlooked is that Nero's given first name is also Domitian, so we can understand how many might believe that Nero was resurrected as Flavius Domitianus, who ramped up the second Great Tribulation against Christians. The legend continues on into our time, with some early believers prophesying that in the end time, it would be Nero that would arise as the Antichrist, and even the Apollyon, the keeper, the key of the evil dead. Nero and Domitian, 2 despots that filled up the cup of the blood of martyrs, and will forever find their names in the Hall of Shame, in the museum of all those who ever lived on the earth.
Today I'm reading from First Enoch, from the parable section, or maybe your book says similitudes or mashalim, starting in chapter 45, the second parable, and this one concerns the elect one, or the Bakar, and the Son of Man, or the Ben Adam. I'm reading from Joseph Lumpkin's translation, rather than my own, but I will be making some changes as I go along. Let's learn about the Bakar and the Ben Adam, the chosen one, and the Son of Man. And this is the second parable concerning those who deny the name of the dwelling of the holy ones and Yahweh Elohim. They will not ascend to the sky. They will not come on the land. Such shall be the lot of the sinners who have denied the name of Yahweh Elohim, who are preserved for the day of suffering and tribulation. On that day, my elect one will sit on the throne of glory, and shall try the works of the righteous. And their places of rest shall be innumerable, and their souls shall grow strong within them, when they see my elect one, and those who have called on my
my glorious name. Then will I cause my elect one to dwell among them. I will transform heaven and make it an eternal blessing and light. And I will transform the earth and make it a blessing. And I will cause my elect ones to dwell on it. But the sinners and evildoers will not set foot on it. For I have seen and have satisfied my righteous ones with peace, and have caused them to dwell before me. But for the sinners there is judgment impending with me, so that I shall destroy them from the face of the earth. And there I saw one whose face looked ancient. His head was white like wool, and with him was another being, whose countenance had the appearance of a man, and whose face was full of graciousness, like one of the holy angels. And I asked the angel who went with me, and showed me all the hidden things concerning the Son of Man. Who was he, and where did he come from, and why did he go with the Ancient One? And he answered and said to me, This is the Son of Man who has righteousness, with whom dwells righteousness, and who reveals all the treasures of that which is hidden, because Yahweh Elohim has chosen him, and whose lot has preeminence before Yahweh Elohim in righteousness, and is forever. And this Son of Man, whom you have seen, will raise up the kings and the mighty from their seats, and the strong from their thrones, and will loosen the reins of the strong and break the teeth of sinners. And he will put down the kings from their thrones and kingdoms, because they do not exalt and praise him, nor humbly acknowledge who bestowed their kingdom on them. And he will make the strong hang their heads, and will fill them with shame. And darkness will be their dwelling, and worms will be their bed, and they will have no hope of rising from their beds, because they do not exalt the name of Yahweh Elohim. They raise their hands against the Most High, and tread on the earth, and dwell on it, and all their deeds manifest unrighteousness. Their power rests on their riches, and their faith is in the gods that they have made with their hands. They deny the name of Yahweh Elohim, and they persecute the houses of his congregations, and the faithful who depend on the name of Yahweh Elohim. In those days the prayer of the righteous will have ascended, and the blood of the righteous from the earth will be before Yahweh Elohim. In those days the holy ones who dwell above in the sky shall unite with one voice and supplicate and pray and praise, and give thanks and bless the name of Yahweh Elohim on behalf of the blood of the righteous that has been shed, that the prayer of the righteous may not be in vain before Yahweh Elohim, that they may have justice, and that they may not have to wait forever. In those days I saw the head of days, when he seated himself on the throne of his glory, and the books of the living opened before him, and all his host that is in heaven above, and his counselors stood before him, and the hearts of the holy men were filled with joy, because the number of the righteous had been offered, and the prayer of the righteous had been heard, and the blood of the righteous had not been required before Yahweh Elohim. And in that place I saw the spring of righteousness. It was inexhaustible, and around it were many springs of wisdom. And all the thirsty drank of them, and were filled with wisdom, and their dwellings were with the righteous and holy and elect. And at that hour that Son of Man was named in the presence of Yahweh Elohim, and his name was brought before the head of days, even before the sun and the signs were created, before the stars of heaven were made. His name was named before Yahweh Elohim, and he shall be a staff to the righteous, and they shall steady themselves and not fall. And he shall be the light of the Gentiles, and the hope of those who are troubled of heart. All who dwell on earth will fall down and worship before him, and will praise and bless, and sing and celebrate Yahweh Elohim. And for this reason he has been chosen and hidden in front of him, before the creation of the world and forevermore.
The wisdom of Yahweh Elohim has revealed him to the holy and righteous, for he's preserved the lot of the righteous, because they have hated and rejected this world of unrighteousness, and have hated all the works and ways in the name of Yahweh Elohim. For in his name they are saved, and according to his good pleasure, and it is he who has regard to their life. In these days the kings of the earth and the strong who possess the land because of the works of their hands will be shamed. Because on the days of their anguish and affliction they will not be able to save themselves. And I will give them over into the hands of my elect. As a straw in the fire, so shall they burn before the face of the holy. As lead in the water shall they sink before the face of the righteous, and no trace of them will be found any more. And on the day of their affliction there will be rest on the earth, because the evil ones will be destroyed. And before him they shall fall down and not rise again. And there shall be no one to take them with his hands and raise them up, for they have denied Yahweh Elohim and his anointed one. Then the name of Yahweh Elohim will be blessed. For wisdom is poured out like water, and glory will not fail before him ever. For he is mighty in all the secrets of righteousness, and unrighteousness shall disappear like a shadow, and will no longer exist, because the elect one stands before Yahweh Elohim, and his glory is forever and ever, and his might for all generation. In him dwells the spirit of wisdom, and the spirit that gives insight, and the spirit of understanding and of might, and the spirit of those who have fallen asleep in righteousness. And he shall judge the secret things, and no one will be able to utter a lying or idle word before him, for he is the elect one before Yahweh Elohim, according to his good pleasure. And in those days, a change will take place for the holy and elect, and the light of days will abide on them, and glory and honor will turn to the holy. On the day of trouble, affliction will be heaped on the evil, and the righteous will be victorious in the name of Yahweh Elohim. For he will tell this to others, that they may repent and turn away from the works of their hands. They will have no honor through the name of Yahweh Elohim, but through his name they will be saved, and Yahweh Elohim will have compassion on them, for his mercy is great. He is righteous also in his judgment, and in the presence of his glory unrighteousness also will not stand. At his judgment the unrepentant will perish before him. And from now on I will have no mercy on them, says Yahweh Elohim. And in those days the earth will also give back that which has been entrusted to it, and Sheol also shall give back that which has been received, and hell shall give back that which it owes. For in those days the elect one will arise, and he will choose the righteous and holy from among them, for the day has drawn near that they should be saved. And in those days the elect one will sit on his throne, and all the secrets of wisdom and counsel will pour from his mouth. For Yahweh Elohim has given them to him, and has glorified him. In those days will the mountains leap like rams, and the hills will skip like lambs satisfied with milk. And the faces of all the angels in heaven will be lighted up with joy. And the earth will rejoice, and the righteous will dwell on it, and the elect will walk in it. And after those days, in that place where I had seen all the visions of that which is hidden, for I had been carried off in a whirlwind, and they had borne me toward the west. There my eyes saw all the secret things of the sky that will be, a mountain of iron, a mountain of copper, and a mountain of silver, and a mountain of gold, and a mountain of soft metal, and a mountain of lead. And I asked the angel who went with me, saying, What things are these that I have seen in secret? And he said to me, All these things that you have seen shall serve the authority of his Messiah, that he may be powerful and mighty on the earth. The angel of peace answered me, saying, Wait a little while,
and all secret things will be revealed to you, things that surround Yahweh Elohim. And these mountains that your eyes have seen, the mountain of iron, and the mountain of copper, and the mountain of silver, and the mountain of gold, and the mountain of soft metal, and the mountain of lead, all of these will be like wax before fire in the presence of the elect one, like the water that streams down from above on those mountains, and they will be weak under his feet. And it will come to pass in those days that none will be saved, either by gold or by silver, and none will be able to save themselves or escape. And there will be no iron for war, nor materials for breastplates. Bronze shall be of no use. Tin will be worthless, and lead will not be desired. All these things will be destroyed from the face of the earth when the elect one appears before Yahweh Elohim.
The Bar Kokhba Revolt. The first Jewish revolt against Rome, which ended with the destruction of Jerusalem and the burning of the temple, was chronicled by the great Jewish historian Josephus. That war lasted between 66 and 73 AD. Much of his book, A Jewish War, which extends 681 pages in the Standard Lieb Classical Text Edition, it's an eyewitness account. Josephus commanded the Jewish forces in Galilee until he surrendered in 67. For some time, he was a prisoner of war and accompanied Vespasian to Alexandria. Later, he returned to Judea with Titus, and he was thus able to describe the destruction of Jerusalem day by day, sometimes hour by hour. Now, the second Jewish revolt against Rome, which was 132 to 136 AD, had no Josephus. The only account written relatively close to the events is that of Roman historian Cassius Dio, who wrote at the beginning of the 3rd century. His report in the abbreviation of a Byzantine monk of the 11th century covers slightly more than 2 pages in the Loeb Classical Texts edition. Most of what we know about that second revolt is therefore based on epigraphical, papyrological, numismatic, and archaeological remains. Until recent years, it's often been assumed that the threat to Roman power posed by the revolt was relatively insignificant, perhaps something like the flea that bites the elephant. The elephant barely knows that he's been bit. This, despite the fact that, if Dio is to be believed, the revolt posed a serious threat to Rome, although he also reports the Jewish losses were enormous. Some recent archaeological finds are indeed consistent with a fear-struck Jewish public cowering before Roman might. Scores of hiding places, or refuge caves, have been discovered in the Judean desert, where Jews fled in the hope of avoiding Roman troops. Elaborate tunnels in the basements of village homes served the same purpose. These refuge caves and hiding places often reflect the desperate circumstances of those who were fleeing or hiding. In the past few years, Israeli archaeologists have identified several hundreds of such places south of Jerusalem in the Shephelah. The discovery of letters, contracts, and orders of the Jewish leader of the revolt, Bar Kokhba, that's why the revolt's often called the Bar Kokhba Revolt, in a cave in the Judean desert known as the Cave of Letters, and in the Wadi Murabat cave seems to depict a local chieftain holed up in the wilderness, hardly a threat to the powerful Roman Empire. On the other hand, the rebels were sufficiently in control of territory to be able to mint coins. Overstruck Roman coins inscribed "Freedom of Israel" and "For the Freedom of Jerusalem." More important, a careful examination of the short account by Cassius Dio, in conjunction with old and recent inscriptional recoveries that demonstrate that the Second Jewish Revolt constituted a major challenge to Roman military power and a shameful wound to Roman self-esteem and pride.
A small nation and a small province dared revolt for the second time against mighty Rome. The Jews were able to keep the empire at bay for nearly 4 years, inflicting enormous losses on Roman forces. Moreover, an analysis of the evidence suggests that the revolt extended beyond Judea proper into Arabia and perhaps also into Galilee. Indeed, the Second Jewish Revolt shook the foundations of the Roman Empire. What is the evidence for this? Our discussion will be framed by Dio, who reports that many Romans perished.
You may contact us at Jackson Snyder Presents at this email address, veroyahad@gmail.com. That is veroyahad@gmail.com. And let me remind you, you are listening to Jackson Snyder Presents with your host tonight, Bogdan G. Schruumkoff. Thank you for listening. We'll be right back. Jackson Snyder Present is back. Join us now for more of this interesting discussion.
Indeed, so many that when Hadrian reported to the Senate concerning the war, he pointedly omitted the traditional salutation, "I and the legions are well." True, the losses on the Jewish side were, if anything, even more horrendous. Dio claims that 985 Jewish villages were razed to the ground. In addition, 580,000 men were slain in the various raids and battles, and the number who perished by famine, disease, and fire was past finding out. Dio's numbers don't seem to be a gross exaggeration. Probably they're based on the census numbers in the province and the report given to the Senate by Hadrian. Dio also reports that Hadrian dispatched his best generals to crush the Jewish revolt. Apparently, their joint effort was needed, and there would be no reason to exaggerate on this point. The first of these generals, and the only one Dio names, was Julius Severus, who was dispatched from Britain, where he was governor and commanded the Roman troops. This in itself is a sign of an extreme emergency. Such transfers by the emperor were not made arbitrarily or capriciously. Britain was one of the two most important military commands in the empire, with only Syria to rival it. In other circumstances, transferring a man like Severus from Britain to Judea would be understood as a demotion. It must have been a desperate situation that made it necessary to send Severus to tiny Judea. Promptly after his victory against the Jews, he was put in charge of Syria, as might be appropriate to a warrior of his standing. The Roman state of emergency is also reflected in yet another striking measure, the transfer of a considerable number of soldiers from a military unit known as the Classis Missinensis to the Legio X Fretensis in Judea. Membership in the former didn't require highly prized Roman citizenship. In the legions, though, Roman citizenship was a prerequisite. The Roman high command would never have authorized a wholesale transfer of soldiers, necessarily making them Roman citizens, from the Classis Missinensis to a legion, had the situation not seemed grave. There's now plenty of proof for this transfer, since we have 12 military diplomas for soldiers of the Mycene fleet from 160 AD. These diplomas were issued to soldiers originally recruited in 133 to 134. According to the survival rate of these diplomas, we can see that in 133 to 134, at least 2,000 and probably 3,000 or more new soldiers were recruited to the Mycene fleet. That such an amount of new recruits was necessary in those years could only happen when the fleet has lost in one moment almost all soldiers. The gaps in the fleet units were created by the transfer of the majority of the sailors to the Legio X Fretensis. Similarly, soldiers were conscripted in Italy and the provinces for service in the Jewish war. Although Rome still had conscripted soldiers, by this time conscription in Italy was rarely used. This is one of the rare occasions. 2 senators were in charge of these conscriptions, one in the Abruzzi to the east of Rome, one in the Transpadana. The Legio 22 Diotariana is attested for the last time in the year 119. It may have well been lost in the Jewish War. In any case, Cornelius Fronto, teacher of the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, writes in his history of the Parthian War between 161 and 166 that Hadrian had suffered many losses of soldiers by the Jews. This is proven also by the 4 diplomas found in southern Turkey. They attest to a big conscription in 135 AD, done in the province of Lycia Pamphylia in southern Asia Minor to fill up the auxiliary units in Syria Palestina, which had suffered during the battles against the troops of Bar Kokhba. Scholars differ about just how large a Roman force was required to suppress the Bar Kokhba revolt. But even the minimalists recognize that, in addition to the 2 legions stationed in Judea, at least 7 more legions in full force, or represented by vexillationists, that is, parts of the legions from other provinces, were deployed by the Romans in Judea to suppress the revolt. Those who think that more troops were involved put the number at 12 or 13 legions. In either case, especially given the size of the province, this was a huge military force. The Roman High Command realized that it was facing a situation fraught with danger, a situation that called for tapping all possible resources and a major redeployment of its military forces. Another indication of the fierceness and difficulty of the fighting comes from the accolades conferred at the end of the war. In Republican times, victorious Roman generals were awarded triumphs, but since the time of Augustus, they were awarded the Ornamenta Triumphalia, or military awards equivalent to a triumph. This was the ultimate wish of every provincial governor and the greatest reward for commanding a field army. The honor was eagerly sought, but few received these decorations. A great deal of fighting occurred during the early years of Hadrian's reign in Britain, Mauritania, the lower Danube, and Dacia, but no one, so far as we know, received the Ornamenta Triumphalia in that connection. The situation was far different in the case of the Jewish revolt, as the recent scholarship has revealed. We know from 2 inscriptions from Dalmatia that at the end of the revolt, the Senate awarded Ornamenta Triumphalia to Julius Severus at Hadrian's initiative. One of the inscriptions gives the reason for the reward, ob res in Judea prospere gestas, because he has fought successfully in Judea. That Severus was awarded the Ornamenta Triumphalia is hardly surprising. He's the only general Dio mentions by name as having been requisitioned to suppress the revolt. But there were other generals as well. Dio tells us that Hadrian sent against them his best generals. A careful look at some well-known inscriptions indicate who they were and also that they too received Ornamenta Triumphalia. An inscription from Ancyra in Galatia records that the governor of Syria, one Publicius Marcellus, left his province because of the Jewish rebellion. Therefore, one of the legionary legates in Syria acted at the same time as governor. Another inscription found in Aquileia in Italy relates that the same Marcellus received Ornamenta Triumphalia. Although the inscription doesn't tell us directly what feat Marcellus received this award for, it's sure that it was for his service in suppressing the Jewish revolt. If Marcellus's contribution to the ultimate Roman victory would have been a modest one, his award would have been Dona Militaria, or the military decoration. That he received the coveted Ornamenta Triumphalia indicates that his contribution to Rome's final victory was decisive. Fragmentary text from Fulginii in Italy lists the honors awarded to one Haterius Nepos, attested in some papyri as governor of Arabia in 130 to 131 AD. The broken-off text concludes with the words Triumphalib blank blank blank. which has been correctly restored as Triumphabilis Ornamentis. Triumphalibus Ornamentis Honoratus, honored with triumphal decorations. This honor must have been bestowed on Nepos after 131, and other inscriptions made it clear that it could not have been bestowed after 136. From all of this evidence, the conclusion is inescapable that it was awarded to him after the Bar Kokhba revolt, no doubt in honor of his contribution to its suppression. Hadrian was extremely parsimonious in bestowing military distinctions on generals, with the exception of those who won victory in Jewish revolt. This alone was worthy of the honor. The same restraint he had previously exercised in bestowing military honors on others, he had applied to himself. Unlike many of his predecessors, he didn't accept any acclamation as imperator from his soldiers until the conclusion of the Jewish revolt. From this time onward, he was called Imperator II, victorious for the second time. Only because Hadrian accepted the title Imperator could he then bestow on his senatorial generals the Ornamenta Triumphalia. By accepting the title Imperator, he made it clear that the victory over the Jews was worthy of a triumph, and his generals could then participate in his glory. By the way, the title Imperator, of course, means emperor. Emperor Hadrian. The Roman province of Judea was considerably larger than Judea proper, which comprised only the area from Jerusalem to Hebron in the south and to Emmaus in the west. Dio notes that all Judea, in other words, the entire province, not just Judea proper, had been stirred up. He goes on to tell us that the Jews everywhere were showing signs of disturbance, were gathering together and giving evidence of great hostility to the Romans. The Roman high command must have also worried that the revolt might spread beyond the province of Judea. Indeed, it probably did. Dio reports that many outside nations, too, were joining them through eagerness for gain, and the whole earth, one might almost say, was being stirred up over the matter. We know that Publicius Marcellus, governor of Syria, took part in the war against the Jews, but this doesn't mean that parts of the rebellious Jews came to the province of Syria, or that Jews living in this country participated in the fight against Rome. But we know that at least parts of the province of Arabia were involved. This is not only proven by the Ornamenta Triumphalia bestowed on Hatarius Nepos, the governor of Arabia, but more by documents that originated in Arabia but were found outside the province. We've already mentioned the refuge caves in the Judean desert to which the Jews fled. One of these is known as the Cave of the Letters, excavated by Israel's best-known archaeologist, the late Yegiel Yadin. Among the most startling finds in the cave was a cache of letters known as the Babatha Archive, consisting of 37 personal documents belonging to Babatha, a twice-married widow of some substance who, and this is the important part of our purposes here, came from the Provincia Arabia, that is, Arabia, on the eastern side of the Dead Sea. Some people thought she and others willingly joined the revolt, but since we now know that Hatarius Nepos fought in the war against the rebels of Bar Kokhba, it's more likely that Babatha and others left their villages to escape the fighting in Provincia Arabia, in Arabia. Finally, with others, she fled to the caves of Nahal Hever, taking with her the family documents. Like her, another Jewish woman, Salome Komais, escaped to the caves, where her documents were also found. At the center of the revolt in Judea proper, the initial Roman response was no doubt led by the Roman governor at the same time, one Tinius Rufus. He was probably displaced by Julius Severus, if he didn't die during the beginning of the war. With the addition of Publicius Marcellus, the governor of Syria, and even more important, Hatarius Nepos, the governor of Arabia, the revolt took on far greater dimensions. It swept the entire region around Judea. The Romans, alarmed by the spread of the revolt, had to invest much more energy and manpower than they expected. The armies of the neighboring provinces were mobilized. The final victory, when it did come, was not an easy one. In the 1970s, marble fragments of an inscription from what must have been a very large monumental arch were discovered at Tel Shalem in the Jordan Valley, about 10 miles south of Beth Shean. What immediately strikes one about this inscription is that the letters in the first line are nearly 1.5 feet high. Those on the second line are almost 10 inches high, and in the third line they are 7 inches high. With only some exceptions, the letters in this inscription are larger than those in any inscription found even in Rome. The exceptions are, for example, the Arch of Titus, the Pantheon Hall built by Hadrian, and the Temple of Castor and Pollux in the Forum Romanum. The monumentality of the inscription is also reflected in its length, about 35 feet, and it's in Latin, although Greek was the dominant language here in the 2nd century. Indeed, almost all the inscriptions from the city of Scythopolis or Beth Shean are in Greek. Although the inscription is fragmentary, only about a quarter of it has survived, its reconstruction is quite certain. It is a dedication to Hadrian on what was surely a monumental triumph arch similar to the Arch of Titus in Rome. The end of the third line is missing, but given the context and the amount of missing space, the reconstruction seems very probable. That is, SPQR, Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and the people of Rome. Or it may have been the name of a Roman legion, but this reconstruction is less likely. The dedication of this arch to Hadrian in Judea was the recognition of the Senate and people in faraway Rome of the seriousness of the challenge that the empire had just faced. And it reflects the monumental efforts required to suppress an enemy so small and yet so fierce. The arch can be taken as a sign and symbol of the relief felt in Rome, at the center of the Roman Empire, no less than by Hadrian and his generals, when the danger was over. The final triumph over the rebels was thus advertised and documented in the rebellious province now that it was once again fully under Roman control.
We have our problems, our salary caps, our Lexuses and Beamers are just enough to pass. And in the East where we're manufactured, alongside all our clothes, they're cashing in their check and taking over the world. But where I am, there's coffee in my cup. There's cigarettes and magazines littered in the streets. My friends and I, we go out once a week. And where I am is good enough for me. In the South we have our Texicans who keep the border clean. They have their fun in Mexico and hunt down refugees. Then in the North we have our friends and French Canadians too. They've got their royal mounties and their maple leaf tattoos. But where I am, there's money to be made. There's friendships to be broken, and there's bills to be paid. My friends and I have everything we need. And where I am is good enough for me. Sure, I'm not a part of your machine, and maybe you and I are just as different as we seem. But feast or famine, I have found a way to be free. So where I am is good enough for me. There's cigarettes and magazines littered in the streets. My friends and I have everything we need. And where I am is good enough for me. I said where I am is good enough for me.
Colorado by Chaim Grade. Am I on Earth? Am I not on some other star? The day, like a clear child's eye, looks down on this district, and I look up through a veil of joyful tears. Red, flaming cliffs. I've met you somewhere before, but where? When awake, or in a hospital bed when I fevered? Daytime, when the sun was shining, or when it was dark with rain? I don't know. I know only that you once approached me, running stormily and wildly like a pride of lions. And just like the sunset, you disappeared into my memory. Though it is hard to believe in a garden of gods, your flying past me has ignited belief in my heart. Now you've become a bonfire of glowing roses, your cliffs that I've seen soar. They say the gods reside in your mountain cracks. I've named you Mesopotamia, the city in the desert, where Father Abraham's laden wedding camels dozed. That's what I want to call the caravan of mountain peaks, and I also call familiarly the army of walkers and riders drunk like me, on the sylvan air and happily celebrating the sunny, clear day. Stand still, my traveling companion. Listen to the noise of the depths. What sound is that? A waterfall? Or the wind in the trees? Only he who has wept bitterly in the night out of disappointment can feel the joyous mood of the silent cliffs. Only he in whose heart a secret sorrow gnaws, and whose hairy head has been burned up by a thought. Only he can understand what the ancient swaying forest murmurs, and how sweet it is to die in the shade of the trees. Forward, my companions! Let's climb higher to the mountain. We are fated to see further unbelievable wonders today. Sorrow has only one face beneath its nocturnal veil, but joy has many faces, my merry traveler. Blazing red cliffs, like burning towers, rusty gold Rockies, like heaps of autumn leaves. Snows and storms have polished you for millennia, and sunshine has melted your golden forms till you've emerged as a garden of gods. Now you flicker like a chain of Indian bonfires, glowing stone-bordered bonfires that give us signs to guide us even farther across the abysses, till we all reach the snowy mountain peak. Yiddish poet Chaim Grade, 1910 through 1982.
We have about 2 minutes left, and I want to take this opportunity to invite you to our online Shabbat service. That is, the New Earth Restoration online Shabbat service at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, which you can get to from Zoom over to www.theyahad.com, THEYHAD.com. There's also a way to get there with your telephone, but you'll have to go to our internet website at veroessene.org to get that information. You'll never remember it if I recite it here. We use ancient liturgies, the earliest services that we can find, those closest to the Master. We do them as responsive readings in both English and Hebrew, some parts Aramaic. We'll have a time for prayer requests and testimonies every service, and rotational speakers, which means we have a different speaker every Shabbat of the month, so you all just don't get bored. I'm speaking this week again, third time in a row though, because I'm doing a series on ancient sermons. What sermon might Yahshua have heard or read? Might be surprised, but there are several from the Dead Sea Scrolls that predate him, which certainly he knew of. We find the whole foundation of the New Testament in the later Dead Sea Scrolls. You have been listening to Jackson Snyder Presents on Hebrew Nation Radio.